Recent studies depict Nigeria's first foreign policy as being...
The word.
Recent studies depict Nigeria's foreign policy as being chameleon in nature, a foreign policy constantly in a state of flux as a result of internal and external dynamics inherent in any given administration. Most Nigerians are not directly affected by the foreign policy in their day-to-day lives, but would feel the ripple effects. An expertly run foreign policy machinery is an invaluable asset to the economy. It can secure better trade deals and foreign direct investment. It can also help to create better intelligence for our security operatives. It's my pleasure to welcome Professor Bola Akinterinwa, who's the former DG, Nigerian Institute of International Affairs. Good morning.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
You've been working on this foreign policy thing forever. Now,
it's the chameleon part. The chameleon part of it, you know, changing.
Would you say that our foreign policy is progressing in the right direction?
That's a very difficult, because it is complex, question.
Hydra-headed.
Now, there are two levels of analysis. When you consider foreign policy as a strategic in terms of objectives being pursued, then you look at what objectives are at stake. But when you look at how to translate the objectives into action, then you now come to the level of tactical foreign policy. In other words, what are the methods? How do you want to achieve your foreign policy objectives? So at the level of foreign policy objectives, I think the factor of a chameleonic character will not be there. The foreign policy focus is constant, right from 1960 to date. But in terms of tactical foreign policy, we are always witnessing changes. And this is why when you look at Nigeria's foreign policy doctrines, we started with the idea of Africa being the cornerstone of Nigeria's foreign policy. This lasted from 1960 to 1976 until Professor Adebayo Adedeji was asked to chair a commission which reviewed it and said, no, Africa should not be the cornerstone, but we should change the word from cornerstone to centerpiece. Now, since 1976 to date, we've been talking about Africa being the centerpiece. But when Professor Agbola Gambari became the Minister of Foreign Affairs, he brought a new intellectual dimension to it. And he thought that, look, we may retain Africa as centerpiece of Nigeria's foreign policy. However, that there will be need to have some operational areas. And he came up with the doctrine of concentric circles. And that's why we've been talking about foreign policy concentricism. For him, there should be 4 operational areas. All right. The innermost concentric circle, the West African circle, the African circle, and the global circle. So he believes that, look, we need to prioritize our foreign policy operational areas. But Ambassador Oluyemi Adeniji refined that to say it will not be enough to talk about prioritization of our foreign policy interests, but that what really is the interest being pursued in each given concentric circle. The innermost circle is made up of Nigeria itself and the immediate neighboring countries, Benin, Niger, Chad, and Cameroon. All right. Okay. Then the next outer circle is West Africa. The third outer circle is Africa. And the last one is the whole
rest
world.
Of the world.
So Ambassador Adeniji now said, look, if we do not articulate the objectives, the interests that are at stake, then operational areas being prioritized will not mean anything. So he came up with the doctrine of constructive and beneficial concentrism as distinct from the general concentric approach given by Professor Agbola Gambari. And at the end of the day, the latest in the series of changes there was introduced by Chief Ojoma Duike. He came up with the doctrine of citizen diplomacy. He's now saying that, look, as much as Professor Gambari was correct, as much as Ambassador Oluyemi Adeniji was correct, the issue now is that even if you now know Nigeria's interest being pursued in any given circle, for as long as the citizen of Nigeria is not benefiting from it, then there will still be problem. That at the end of the day, the Nigerian must be the ultimate, focus of any foreign policy issue. So at that level, we are having all these chameleonic changes there, but in terms of the long-term focus objective remains the same. That is black dignity, defense of African interest, the black man, and ensuring regional peace, as well as sustaining the goals, the values of the United Nations, and so on and so forth. All these remain there. National security is there, territorial integrity is there, defense of force.
No, Prof. The idea of the citizen diplomacy, where the Nigerian is now the focus, that being as it is, Nigerians overseas have hardly felt protected by their nation. When things happen to them overseas, they feel like they are alone. They don't get any kind of support or protection from their country.
Well, as much as I agree with you, I would say that you are wrongly right. Now, wrongly because this time you assume that the government has not been doing anything. No, government has been doing something. It's on record that government has been doing what is possible to protect them. But you are right, because at the end of the day, most Nigerians in diaspora, especially those having interest in linkages with Nigeria, those are the words they talk about, they tell us. So you are right there. But you see, the truth is that at the level of wrongness, the Nigerians themselves are directly responsible for
predicament.
Yes, you know why? The government policy is that any Nigerian traveling overseas should report their arrival, their presence in the host country to the embassy. But they wouldn't know. But people sit in the comfort of their homes thinking that the foreign affairs officers are another witchcrafts, which can know their movement. All right? They are not witchcrafts.